Our guest is already here, si former Senate President Franklin Drilon. Let's bring him in. Baka maputol linya natin eh. SP, former Senate President Franklin Drilon, maraming salamat for joining us this afternoon. Welcome back to Storycon.
Hi, Senator.
Good afternoon, Ed. Good afternoon, Ami.
Si Ronald
magandang
is,
hapon.
si
Good
Ronald is
afternoon.
mobile.
Mas kabisado ni SP Drilon itong dynamic sa Senate. Tayo
Apat na beses ako natanggal as Senate President, kaya memoryado ko.
Sir, ano yun, sir? That's glass half empty, glass half full. Natanggal kayo kasi na-elect muna kayo na Senate President. Diba? So it's how you look at it. Sir, but sir, before we go to the Senate position, sir, let me ask you first about some legal issues, especially after the Supreme Court decided last week on VP Sara Duterte's the impeachment complaint against VP Sara Duterte. Pinagtatalunan na, among other things, yung definition ng session days. In the end, the Supreme Court decided to define what session days means versus what Congress wanted it, how Congress wanted it to be defined. What do you think po?
Well, alam mo, when I was in law school, we have a saying, the law is what the gods of Padre Faura say.
Okay.
Kaya po kung anong, especially in today's environment, because of the very divided political scenario, the Supreme Court assumes a very critical role, and that is the interpretation of the Constitution, of which under the Constitution they are supreme. And therefore, sila po ang pinaniwalaan ng tao ngayon. Unfortunately, particularly the legislative does not enjoy the trust today of the people that much because of what has transpired in the past few months.
Di ba yung Constitution is supreme to the Supreme Court?
Pa?
Yung Constitution is supposed to be higher than the Supreme Court. Malinaw naman yung wording dun sa Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court interprets what the Constitution means. And therefore, as we say, what the gods of Padre Faura say is the law.
Pero
Kaya
SP,
wala naman dun sa Constitution, yung sinasabi nila, nagdagdag sila eh. Nagdagdag sila ng mga rules dun eh.
Tama po, Ami. Maraming, a lot of people agree with you. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court has the say.
pero SP, totoo ba na merong tiwala ang tao sa kanila? Does the survey says that? Parang iba yung resulta ng surveys eh.
Well, sa akin, ang mas comparing the political bodies of this government and the Supreme Court, mas naniniwala ang tao sa Korte Suprema. Yan ang
Sorry,
akin.
mas mataas rating ni Vice President.
Sorry?
Mas mataas yung rating ni Vice President kaysa sa Supreme Court.
Anyway.
Ibang grupo naman yun, naman si Ami. I think a reference point natin is between Congress's credibility and the Supreme Court's credibility.
Yung office ang inaano natin.
So, pero sir, okay, granted po. In the end, siyempre, it's the Supreme Court na talaga masusunod. It's a final arbiter of sorts. But from your recollection, I mean, at least for context man lang, from your recollection, how has session day always been defined?
I'm sorry,
How has
Ed?
session day?
What's the question?
How has the concept of a session day always been defined?
I'm sorry, the lines are not so good.
Yes, sir.
Ano daw po ang definition
ano po talaga?
ng session day?
Opo.
Ang Supreme Court ba ang magde-define SP kung what is a session day para sa Kongreso?
Dapat hindi. But pinasukan nila, they defined it, so that's how it went. The Supreme Court interpreted what session days is. And that's a judicial interpretation of the Constitution. And even assuming, yun ang problema natin. What do? You have to follow the law, and the Supreme Court decision is part of the law of the land. We may not agree with the Supreme Court, and us do not agree with the Supreme Court, but they are the interpreters of the Constitution. Ika nga, they are the Supreme Court, including decisions which are supremely wrong is a decision that they render.
I like the way you put that, sir.
cure dyan? Si panahon pa ni Noynoy, he's been talking already about judicial overreach. Ano ba ang viable cure for that?
Well, I have no answer
Viable,
to that. I mean, I'm sorry, I have no answer to that. The Constitution is supposed to provide all the safeguards, including the Judicial and Bar Council, including electing the correct president. So,
Oo nga.
ganun talaga, tao ang bumubuo ng sistema, tao rin ang nagsumisira. I have no answer to your question, Abby, to be candid, because it is not a ground for impeachment.
Ng
Okay.
Supreme Court justices, it's not.
The particular interpretation of the Constitution is not a
Yes.
ground for impeachment, even if you don't agree with it.
Okay.
Kahit magdagdag sila ng kung ano-ano ron, na wala naman doon.
That's correct. Yes, I don't think that an impeachment is feasible, as what we say today. See today.
Oo. Pwede ba mag-legislate naman ang Kongreso ng matters
Yes.
that will affect the Supreme Court?
I mean, legislation is feasible if it does not involve an interpretation of the Constitution. But if it's an
okay.
interpretation of the Constitution, you cannot legislate because that's under the Constitution, the Supreme Court is given the exclusive task of interpreting what the Constitution says.
Okay, sir. So even if Congress tries to legislate its own definition of a session day, hindi na pwede kasi interpret ng Supreme Court.
Madali sa Korte Suprema yan. And what do you think the Supreme Court will do?
Okay.
So stand strong.
But Congress can assert its power of
Yes,
impeachment.
yes. Congress,
New argument yun, new argument.
that's correct. The Congress can define what the session day is and argue that this is their exclusive power to interpret. But if the Supreme Court entertains a petition to question that interpretation or that interpretation of the session days, then the law is declared unconstitutional, and under
Okay.
our system, the Supreme Court has that power.
Okay.
Pero nothing stops the Supreme Court from ruling in favor of Congress, di ba? Pwede rin naman yung mangyari.
Pwede rin mangyari.
Pero di ba,
Well, in the old school, whether at least during my time, you know, the court has it has in many instances
Reverse.
refrained from ruling on an issue because it involves a political question. That thing today is no longer a reliable doctrine that, or you know, you cannot with certainty say that the Supreme Court will not rule on this because it's a political question.
pero di ba, SP, nawi-weaken yan yung ating system of checks and balances? Kung may ganyang klaseng walang respeto sa mga co-equal branches of government. Kahit ipagpalagay na natin na walang makakapigil sa power ng Supreme Court. Pero hindi ba naiisip ng Supreme Court, hindi ba sila circumspect on how they may weaken?
Ronald, you're addressing you must address that to the wisdom of the members of the Supreme Court, of the Supreme Court justices.
Pero you're saying, Senator, na
It can result in some weakening of the relations between the institutions, but somehow the Supreme Court is given that power to be the final arbiter.
but you're saying, Senator, na dati, madalas nyo namang makitang judicial restraint on the part of the Supreme Court.
Dati, ngayon, you know, because of that provision in the Constitution that the Supreme Court has the power to correct abuse of discretion,
Yes.
that phrase or that power has been interpreted in a very wide latitude to
Oo nga.
to include everything.
Oo nga.
Kaya
Pero pwede naman nilang,
among the issues that will be tackled in case there is a constitutional amendment or con-as is that issue of the widening authority of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Supreme Court because of that phrase.
Oo nga.
But sir, there are some people who've pointed out na, di ba, yung Supreme Court ruled nung July 25 last year on the Sara Duterte impeachment case, and then it affirmed its ruling last week. But even in affirming its ruling, it also changed its definition of session days. Kasi yung July ruling, the Supreme Court said na pasok sa 10 session days yung tatlong impeachment complaints. That's why they set the one-year bar tolling to February 5. And then comes last week's reaffirmation, they appear to have changed the definition of session days. I know, sabi nga ninyo, they're the final arbiter, pero the arbiter appears to have been changing its mind too.
Under our system of government and under our constitution, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter, and that's how they ruled on that issue. So we have to accept it. Of course, what we accept is again subject to various interpretations. Now that's what's happening.
Senator, tanong ko lang, anong mangyayari kasi for the first time we have two impeachment complaints going on against both the President and the Vice President. Anong kahihinat na niya kung sakasakaling magkasabay-sabay na parehong pumunta sa Senado?
Well, okay. Then the Senate will have to try forthwith the impeachment complaints. Okay. So what will happen if they impeach the president first? Assuming theoretically,
Yes.
if the president is impeached, the vice president takes over. Okay, and under the Constitution, in the case of vacancy in the vice president because the official is elevated to the office of the president, the acting or the president now is supposed to nominate from the House from Congress a vice president to be concurred in by if I'm not mistaken by Congress. So there's a process of succession. The fear that there can be a vacuum, there can be vacancies in both offices is not correct. Because there is a process of succession.
Pero sir, you might also have the curious possibility
pero SP,
for
the Vice
example,
President, SP, paano meron kang ongoing impeachment ng Vice President? No? Yung ba ay magpapatuloy dahil magsasucceed siya as President, di ba?
Yun, that's one.
Magsasucceed siya as President.
Tuluyan, Ronald.
Yeah.
Firstly, ito tuluyan because the punishment for impeachment is not only removal from office, but also disqualification from holding public office. So the fact that the impeached official no longer holds office does not make the question academic because there is another penalty, and that is disqualification from public office.
So
Pero
magtutuloy yun kasi
will it
yung isang
continue?
argument
Sorry?
yun.
Will it
May isang
continue?
argument kasi, Senator, yung isang argument, halimbawa natanggal si BBM, convicted, at nag-assume yung kanyang constitutional successor, hindi na siya vice president, so wala na. Hindi na pwedeng, wala na yung offense na na-commit as hindi na siya vice president eh. Kaya hindi na daw siya matutuloy na impeachment trial as a vice president. Presidente na siya eh. Tama ba yun?
Yes. But he was being, or she is being charged with acts committed while she was vice president. And as I
Yes.
said, there is another penalty of disqualification from holding public office. So it can be argued that the impeachment trial can proceed.
Pero sir, these are all going to be new developments. I mean, these have never been tested before.
Gulo, no?
That's correct. Gulo natin eh. Ang gulo.
We're gonna have an
I'm no
interesting
longer
year.
in public office.
We're gonna have an interesting year this year, huh?
SP, are you
Pwede ba
enjoying the
i-prioritize
view?
yun?
One by one.
SP,
Oh.
SP, are you enjoying the view? Hindi na kayo in public office. At,
Yes, I am
what-
enjoying it. No, but it's a challenge to what we know of the Constitution because there are also many issues being raised and being new, like the definition, the Supreme Court getting involved in matters which all the while we thought were political questions, and therefore the rational thing to do is to refrain from getting into it. But the Supreme Court wades into the conflict, so this is what we have today.
For example, sir, yung issue ng due process that the Supreme Court decided on sa Duterte impeachment complaint, all the proof now being required to be submitted to each and every congressman who's going to cast their vote. Do you agree with that? I know the Supreme Court's the arbiter in the end, pero from your perspective, was that an overreach?
You know, the Constitution is very clear that it is the House of Representatives who has the power to determine whether an impeachable offense has been committed and therefore refer the complaint to the Senate. And I hope the Supreme Court follows that very clear line of power, that it is the House of Representatives who determines whether or not there is basis to refer the matter to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, you know, that phrase in grave abuse of discretion has justified intervention by the Supreme Court in so many issues.
Oo nga. So, charter change lang talaga ang kung sakali, can correct this judicial overreach.
And not only that, not only in this, but there are so many other issues that can be reviewed. For example, the matter of the dynasty, anti-dynasty provision. Is, you know, the Constitutional Commission left it to the discretion of Congress. So what do you have? You can never enact an anti-dynasty law.
Sa tingin nyo ngayon, may pag-asa, we have 20 proposals for banning dynasties.
Look at the composition.
Ay, ganda ng reaction niya.
Look at the Senate.
From the executive to the legislature. How can you say that we can pass an anti-dynasty law in the manner that we want it to be?
Pero
Pero
sir,
sa tingin nyo, reasonable expectation, anong inaasahan nyo? They have to come out with
Reasonable
something.
expectation, at most, maybe there can be an anti-dynasty law, but the provision is such that people will not be happy because the evil sought to be addressed is not being addressed. So, para lang, you know, just to
Masabi lang
meron
na
lang law na
mayroon, but you know, if you look at it, talagang, you know, we tried that, but the best that we can do is an anti-dynasty provision, I think, in the barangay election or something.
Yes.
may anti-dynasty provision sa
Sanggunian,
BARM.
SK.
Saka sa BARM.
Sangguniang kabataan,
Yeah,
saka sa BARM.
Yeah, in the barangay election or something.
Yeah. Sangguniang kabataan.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sir, well, kahit pa paano, at least now you have a speaker who says, at least he says, na he wants an anti-dynasty law passed. He says that quite publicly.
Yeah.
Yung nga lang, we don't know if he's going to last as a speaker if he pushes that.
No, that is why I'm saying, yes, there can be an anti-dynasty law passed because of all the pressure, but whether or not it is
The kind you want.
to the standard that we wish it to be, I have my very serious doubts.
Yes.
Pwede naman daw dahan-dahan, sabi ni Janet Garin. Halimbawa, yung proposal nila, yung clustering,
Yung alin?
yung mga prohibition on dynasties divided sa provincial or sa city or sa ganung level, national and local.
You know, it will have so many qualifications you no longer understand. You know.
Parang lang yon, yung minimize your greed lang, ganon, moderate your
Moderate
greed.
your greed.
Parang hindi dahan-dahan yun eh. Parang institutionalizing dynasties yun eh.
I don't want to paddle my own canoe, but I never had a dynastic situation during my term as a elective or elective official.
Kaya nga, no.
Okay. Ay, teka, before we let you go, sir, your thoughts on, kasi we were talking, kanina, we were talking about yung mga seeming shake-up coming dun sa Senate. Tito Soto having a very small margin as Senate President, and si Loren daw inalok na maging Senate President ng minority. Pero tinanggihan daw niya.
Ronald, aram mo, Ronald, Ami, in my view, all of this maneuvering in the Senate is because of the presidential election of 2028. That's what it is. Senators have a moist eye on the presidency. Sara Duterte wants to be president, naturally. So there will be all maneuverings, and the hold of Senate President Soto is very tenuous. Just look at it. You have Pia Cayetano in the majority of 15. If Alan aspires to be the Senate President, what do you think Pia will vote? Will vote with the opposition. Now, you have two Villars who has problems now with the administration.
With the SEC.
Where do you think they will vote? They will use the two votes for political leverage. So, and I will not be surprised, and I will say this, I will not be surprised if part of the maneuvering is the vice presidency is offered to a senator by Sara Duterte. In other words, in exchange for the vote, and Ronald here can confirm this, abay sabihin ko, sige, you vote for this or that, you'll be my vice president in 2028. So this is what it is. Everything is influenced by the presidential election in 2028.
Everything leads to the presidential elections.
That's correct. Yes.
The maneuverings in the Senate are basically based on political calculations. ng
Yes,
mga senator.
yes, political calculation, Ronald.
Yeah.
But we look at it at another point of view. This indicates the lack of a viable political party system in our country. There is none, and that is why the Senate President is, it is very difficult because I have been there and I have been deposed, as I said, 3 times. This is the weakness. This is the result of a multi-party system in a presidential system of government, because there is no impetus, there is no encouragement to unite. You don't lose your seat in the legislature. So you have to look at the political agenda of each of the 24 senators, and that's not easy to do.
Okay, sir. We'll let you go na, sir. Maraming salamat for joining us this afternoon. Former Senate President Franklin Drilon. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Maraming salamat,
Ingat
SP.
po, parate.
Thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ami.
Ingat po.